So today we are working on our factor completely. So factor completely, again, one of those unwritten rules of math. You need to know you always have to factor something completely. They don't always tell you that you have to factor completely. You just need to know, I got to factor completely. So considering this trinomial up here, when we are factoring completely, we always want to look first for a GCF, which is why we went through GCF factoring first, because that's the one you look for first. So is there a GCF of that trinomial up there? Yes, what is it? 3. So GCF equals 3. So part B, write the trinomial as a product involving its GCF. So that is just another way of saying, let's factor that trinomial using the GCF method. So I'm going to put my GCF of 3 on the outside. Again, as another little review, that means you're going to go up here and divide everything by 3. So then inside my parentheses, I get x squared plus 5x plus 6. That's the first step. So then we now need to figure out, how does the trinomial inside the parentheses now factor? Are we going to factor using the next two methods were dots, and the other method was trinomial. So this stuff in the parentheses, are we going to factor using the dots method or the trinomial method? Well, how many terms do we have there? 1, 2, 3, so that means we've got to use that one, trinomial, because it's definitely not dots. Remember, dots is a subtraction, and you've got 2 perfect squares there. So let's factor the stuff inside the parentheses. So trinomial, we set up 2 sets of parentheses for that one. How do we break apart our first term of x squared? X and x. Will our signs be same or different? Remember, plus at the end means the same. We look to the one before it, that means they're both going to be positive. And so then we're looking for what multiplies to give us 6, but then adds to give us 5. 2 and 3. So 2 times 3 gives us 6, but then 2 plus 3 gives us the 5. So there we go. We have factored completely. And so that's always a step you want to go through. You always want to do GCF first, and then figure out, all right, is it 2 terms or is it 3 terms? And then that tells you generally which one you're going to do after that. So factoring completely yet again to try to get the point across. 1, check and factor out a GCF if you can. Sometimes if there is a -1 in front of the leading term, your GCF is going to be a negative. That does happen occasionally. So if there is a -1, your GCF is going to be a negative. So let's take a look at this example here. -2x squared plus 5x minus 2. What is our GCF going to be for that? We don't really have a GCF, do we? But this first leading term here is negative. I've never taught you how to factor with negative. No other teacher has ever taught you how to factor with that first term being a negative. So that means we got to get that negative out of there. So to do so, we factor out a -1. And then again, we go ahead and divide each thing by the -1, which all that really does is it changes all of our signs. So it becomes a positive 2x squared, a minus 5x, and then a plus 2. So we've still done GCF factoring, only we've done it with just a -1. So now we have to ask ourselves, do we have dots factoring next inside the parentheses? Is it 2 terms? Nope. Is it going to be trinomial factor then? Yeah, we got 3 terms in there. Let's give trinomial factoring a try. So, I'm going to put my -1. I'm going to set up my 2 sets of parentheses. So we have a 2x squared. So how do we break that apart? 2x and x. We were doing a few of these last class. What are our signs going to be? Both negative. This positive means they are the same. So you look to the one in front, they're going to both be negative. So now what multiplies to give us 2? 1 and 2. So because I want to get the 5 in the middle, I'm kind of thinking in my head, I'm going to want to put the 2 there, because then it'll get multiplied by the other 2 when I'm doing my big smile. I have the best chance of trying to get my 5. The little smile's a negative 1x. Big smile's a negative 4x. And then there we go, negative 5x. That is our middle term, so we got it. So then write all the factors as a product just means write out our answer that we got, which was negative 1 times 2x minus 1 times x minus 2. This is all of your factors as a product. We actually have 3 factors this time. There's your first factor. This parenthesis is your second factor. And then that parenthesis is your third factor. We got 3 factors this time. 3 things we're multiplying to get us back to where we started. Let's go to the back. So now we got a few practice examples. So again, always wanting to look first for a GCF. So number 1, do we have a GCF? A, good. So I'm going to put my A out front. And I'm going to set up my parentheses. What's going to go in our parentheses? X squared minus 1. Divide both things by A. We got x squared minus 1. So then remember, after the GCF, we look for, if it's got 2 terms, it's dots. If it's got 3 terms, it's going to be trinomial factoring. So how many terms do we got in there? 2. And we got subtraction. Are those 2 terms perfect squares? Do we have an even exponent? Yep, so that's a perfect square. Is 1 a perfect square? Yeah, 1 times 1 gives you 1. 1 is a perfect square. So this means we do have a dots factoring. So we're going to set up 2 sets of parentheses for that. Remember, with our dots factoring, we always have 1 plus and 1 minus. And then how do we break apart our x squared? X and x. Square root of 1 is 1. So we get x plus 1, x minus 1. There we go. All right, let's try our second one over there to the right. 4x squared minus 4x minus 24. Do we have a GCF? Yes. What is it? 4. We have x squared minus x minus 6. So we got 3 terms there. So that means we're going to do trinomial next. Or at least we're going to try trinomial. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So I'll set up my 2 sets of parentheses. X squared gets broken up into x and x. One's positive and one's negative. And then what multiplies to give us 6? We got 2 and 3 or 1 and 6. We're trying to get what number in the middle? We're trying to get a 1 here. So I'm going to try 2 and 3 first. So again, if I do my little smile, that's 2x. Big smile, that's negative 3x. Combine those and we get negative 1x. So that is what we wanted. All right, number 3, do we have a GCF? Nope, not this time. No GCF this time. So are those perfect squares? Is 16 perfect? And we have even exponents, so we got 2 perfect squares. So this is going to be dots. So I'm going to set up my 2 sets of parentheses. One's minus, one's plus. So then what's the square root of 16? 4. And then we divide our exponent in half, so we get 4a squared. 4a squared. And then how does the b to the 4th break up? b squared and b squared. So then let's look at those again. Can we do anything with either of those parentheses? Yes, we can. We have dots again. 4 is a perfect square, and we have even exponents, so those are perfect squares. Why don't we have dots in the second one? What's wrong? What's different about that one? The sign, because that one's positive. The first one we do, though, so we're going to have to factor this again. So these two new sets of parentheses are so I can factor that first one. The second one, as you can see, I just brought that one down after. That's still there. That's still going to be part of our answer. It's just we can't factor it again. So again, one's negative, one's positive. Square root of 4 is 2, and then it's got an a. And then our last terms will be b. And now we're done. Now we don't have any more dots. A few more. Number 4. Do we have a GCF? 2, and there's a little bit more to it. It's not just 2. 2x squared. Again, if you've got to write this up here, go for it. We're dividing each of those by 2x squared so we can figure out what's going to be inside of our parentheses there. So 2x to the 4th divided by 2x squared will give us x squared. Remember, you subtract those exponents, 4 minus 2. And then 6x cubed divided by 2x squared would give us 3x, because 6 divided by 2 is 3. Again, you subtract those exponents. And then 80 divided by 2 gives us 40. So x squared minus 3x minus 40. So then we have a trinomial in there. We have to think to ourselves, can we factor that? Can we already think of things that multiply to give us 40, that when we combine them we can get a 3 in the middle? 8 and 5. So let's go for it. So I'll set up for my trinomial factor. X goes in the first spot. Signs are different because I have that negative 40 at the end there. So which one do you think we should have our negatives, 8 or the 5? 8. So as I said, in your head, we kind of want to slowly start moving that. You start doing negative 8 in your head, little smile, plus 5x gives you your negative 3x. So there we go. All right, number 5. Do we have a GCF? Nope. Do we have 2 terms? Nope. So that means we're going to try trinomial factoring. So I'm going to set up my 2 sets of parentheses. So we'll have x squared and x squared, because it started as x to the 4th, so I divide that in half, x squared, x squared. What will our signs be, same or different? Different. And we're looking for what multiplies to give us 28. 4 and 7. Which one should be our positive? 7, because that's positive. Bigger number should be positive there. Again, that only works when your first term is a 1. So then if we look at those, anything we can do again? See a couple of head nods. Yeah, this last one here. X squared minus 4. Perfect square, perfect square. We got dots factoring there. So x squared minus 4, what does that factor into? X minus 2, x plus 2. And then again, I bring down my x squared plus 7, because that is part of my final answer, so I got to make sure that's in there. So then for 5 and 6, this just goes back to the other thing I was saying on the front. If your first term is negative, you need to make your GCF also negative so that everything else turns positive, and then you can factor again if need be. So for number 5, we would have a 3 that goes into all of those. But since that first term is negative, we're going to actually take out a negative 3. So we got to turn that first term back to be positive. So then we would have x squared plus 2x plus 1, because when I divide everything up here by that negative 3, it changes all of my signs, so they all become positive. So then x squared plus 2x plus 1, can we factor that again? What multiplies to 1 adds to 2? 1 times 1. And then 1 plus 1 gives us 2. Negative 3, x plus 1, x plus 1. Does anybody remember the other way we can write that? Yep. So you could write it like that, or you could write it this way and make it squared since you got the x plus 1 there twice. A lot of times I see, especially if it's a multiple choice question, this is the answer that you're going to find. So just remember, these two things are the same thing, just written in a different form. All right, then our last example in our notes, that negative x squared minus 9x minus 8. What is our GCF for that going to be? Negative 1. Yes, we got to turn that first term positive. So all negative 1 does when you take that out as a GCF is it just changes the sign, so everything becomes positive. So then let's think to ourselves, okay, we got a trinomial. Is there something that multiplies to give us 8 but then adds to give us 9? 8 and 1. So we get x plus 8 and x plus 1. And there we go. I do want to look at quickly before we get to our classwork the little organizer I put in there for you. I believe it comes after this page in notes. It should be on a yellow page. So as I've mentioned before, I am a huge fan of pictures. I like pictures. I'm a visual learner, always have been. So as I mentioned, always looking first for GCF. That's right up there in the first circle. So then once you've done your GCF, the thought process you want to try to get into your head is you want to start asking yourself, okay, well, do I have 2 terms? Do I have 3 terms? Or do I have 4 terms? Because if you have 2 terms, that's when you do your dots, difference of squares. Dots. If you got 3 terms, you then do your trinomial factoring, whether it's just where a is a 1 or a is something else. And then if you've got 4 terms, you're going to do something that we call grouping, which we haven't actually done grouping just yet, but we will do grouping in a couple of days. So that's your thought process when we're doing factor completely. First GCF, then figure out 2, 3, 4. And as you saw in some examples, you don't even have a GCF in some examples. So then you would just move past that and ask yourself, okay, do I have 2 terms, 3 terms, or 4 terms? These examples we're going to